The world should be forewarned to be on the lookout for diseases which have been suppressed for years, suddenly rearing their ugly heads, and decimating populations already on the verge of starvation in the third world nations. Although these peoples will eventually be replaced by the new root race, about to make its appearance in a newly cleansed world, nevertheless, for the moment, this is a tragedy. Cosmic Countdown. Guardian Action Publications of New Mexico. Food is power. We use it to change behavior. Some may call that bribery. We do not apologize. Catherine Bertini, Executive Director of the United Nations World Food Program. We must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader. Robert Mueller, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, who served for a total of 40 years with the UN, in addition to having served as Vice President of the Teilhard Center. He is the creator of the World Core Curriculum and was also heavily involved in the United Nations World Food Program, in addition to being an occult student of Alice and Foster Bailey. The URL below will bring you to Mrs. Bailey's plan for the New World Order. Effective world government will be needed to stave off climate catastrophe. Gary Sticks.
Now, I'm wondering if there can't be an upside to all this. I'm a big fan of the original Star Trek series, and it was only when, there were alien civilizations that seemed to challenge the Earth that you found that the Earth got its act together for the kind of global governance that all the, all the visionaries say we need that if we're going to deal with climate change, if we're going to deal with all the modern issues, global finance, where the sovereignty of individual nations is actually a political barrier to solving these big problems. So can there be an upside to the alien threat?
Believe it or not, when President Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev, we now know during the transcripts of the meeting that he said that if we were ever attacked by the Martians, you and me, the Soviets and the capitalist U.S. would be allies in the fight against the Martians. Well, that's how Ronald Reagan looked at it, and believe it or not, there's some truth to it. If we are faced with a common enemy in outer space, it would indeed help to unite the Earth, just the way Ronald Reagan said.
When we physicists look in outer space for alien life, we don't look for little green men. We look for Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 civilizations. A Type 1 civilization has harnessed planetary power. They control earthquakes, the weather, volcanoes. They have cities on the ocean. Anything planetary, they control. That's Type 1. A Type 2 civilization is stellar. They've exhausted the power of a planet, and they get their energy directly from their mother star. Star Trek and the Federation of Planets, who have colonized a few star systems, will correspond to a Type 2 system. And the empire of Star Wars would correspond to a Type 3 civilization. And I am privileged to be alive in the most important era in the history of the human race, the transition from Type 0 to Type 1. I read the newspaper, and I see evidence of this everywhere. What is the European Union? The European Union has been formed to oppose NAFTA, that is, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. But why? Because we're seeing the beginnings of a Type 1 economy. Huge planetary trading blocks are the beginnings of a Type 1 economy. There's also going to be a Type 1 culture and a Type 1 political system as well. So this transition is perhaps the most important transition of all time. Some people don't want it. They fear this transition because this transition is to a planetary civilization tolerant of many cultures. These are the terrorists. In their gut, they fear this because they know they are witnessing the birth pangs of a beginning of a new planetary civilization, and the terrorists want nothing to do with it.
That's right, according to Kaku, no one opposes world government due to the realization that the centralization of power even at the national level opens up the possibility of tremendous abuses, including willingness of those who believe themselves to be responsible for the lives and well-being of the many to do absolutely horrific things to individuals or to small groups, for the sake of what they perceive as ensuring the security of the most people. Nor could it be a product of awareness of the absolutely inhuman atrocities which have been carried out and are being committed perpetually for the sake of furthering progress toward world government, which, Beside the fact that it obviously makes the propagators unworthy of seeing their will come to fruition, they are being infinitely more deserving of extermination and of any such gratification. Indicates by way of the character of those who are pursuing the goal that it will not be anything which sane and decent people would want any part of. Nor could anyone possibly object to such a system due to their regard for personal freedoms and individuality, whereas the mindless flock of Kaku and other pop scientists, while being firmly convinced that they are smarter for their blind acceptance of the jargon of such persons, for the most part just unthinkingly accept the concept of mankind as a whole, as opposed to the reality that there is no such thing as a group, only individuals. There are many other valid reasons for rejection of world government, such as the impracticality of anything existing at only one location on Earth, and the fact that industry being located in only one region would dictate and severely limit the employment opportunities of persons who would choose to remain in a given region. But according to Kaku, these are not the sorts of things which cause people to oppose global government. No, the slanderous twat claims without any corollary, without qualification, that those who oppose world government are, in fact, terrorists. And as the majority walks around oblivious to this reality, the banks, in collusion with governments and corporations, continue to perfect and expand their tactics of economic warfare, spawning new bases, such as the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, while also inventing a new type of soldier, the birth of the economic hitman. John Perkins, we economic hitmen really have been the ones responsible for creating this first truly global empire, and we work many different ways. But perhaps the most common is that we will identify a country that has resources that our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our big corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, industrial parks, ports, things that benefit a few rich people in that country, in addition to our corporations, but really don't help the majority of the people at all. However, those people, the whole country, is left holding a huge debt. It's such a big debt that they can't repay it, and that's part of the plan, that they can't repay it. And so at some point we economic hitmen go back to them and say, listen, you owe us a lot of money, can't pay your debts, so sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies, allow us to build a military base in your country, or send troops in support of ours to some place in the world, like Iraq, or vote with us on the next UN vote to have their electric utility company privatized and their water and sewage system privatized and sold to US corporations or other multinational corporations. So there was a whole mushrooming thing, and it's so typical of the way that the IMF and the World Bank work. They put a country in debt, in such a big debt it can't pay it, and then you offer to refinance that debt and pay even more interest, and you demand this quid pro quo, which you call a conditionality, or good governance, which means basically that they've got to sell off their resources, including many of their social services, their utility companies, their school systems sometimes, their penal systems, their insurance systems, to foreign corporations. So it's a double, triple, quadruple whammy. Zeitgeistendum. I went around the block, to Pine Street. There I came face to face with the world headquarters of Chase, the bank David Rockefeller built, a bank seeded with oil money and harvested by men like me. This bank, an institution that served the HMs and that was a master of promoting global empire, was in many ways the very symbol of the corporatocracy. I recalled reading that the World Trade Center was a project started by David Rockefeller in 1960, and that in recent years the complex had been considered an albatross. It had the reputation of being a financial misfit, unsuited to modern fiber optic and internet technologies, and burdened with an inefficient and costly elevator system. Those two towers once had been nicknamed David and Nelson. Now the albatross was gone. According to some sources, SIL received funding from the Rockefeller Charities. Family scion John D. Rockefeller had founded Standard Oil, which later divested into the majors, including Chevron, Exxon, and Mobil. In the manner of most of the Latin American dictators who allied themselves with Washington, Panama's rulers interpreted U.S. interests to mean putting down any populist movement that smacked of socialism. They also supported the CIA and NSA in anti-communist activities throughout the hemisphere, and they helped big American businesses like Rockefeller's Standard Oil and United Fruit Company, which was purchased by George H.W. Bush. These governments apparently did not feel that U.S. interests were promoted by improving the lives of people who lived in dire poverty or served as virtual slaves to the big plantations and corporations. Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. Well, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that after all that vilification you would have little choice but to believe that the United States and capitalism are the most demonic forces ever to exist, and that they must be done away with, or that someone has a vested interest in convincing you to think so. And let's not forget, if you have watched it, that the first installment in the Zeitgeist movie series does its best to portray those who populate the hierarchical structures of organized religions as inveterate conmen possessing no conscience whatsoever, perhaps with their very own bad guys in place, some knowingly playing the role, and others simply being the most vile among all humanity, whom the manipulators were fully aware would, when given authority or position, otherwise commit the most wicked acts imaginable, which could then be portrayed as the fault of the system. Perhaps we can find some evidence of this in the form of additional information about the Rockefellers, whose Chase Bank was called in many ways the very symbol of corporatocracy by Mr. Perkins, perhaps in from sources who seem to present a view of the Rockefellers which contrasts drastically with the picture painted by Mr. Perkins and others maintaining that the Rockefellers represent those who seek and will to perpetuate the monetary system regardless of the cost in human suffering. Such as Benjamin Fulford, for example. Also at the SDS convention, men from Business International roundtables tried to buy up some radicals. These are the world's leading industrialists, and they convene to decide how our lives are going to go. We were also offered ESSO, Rockefeller, money. They want us to make a lot of radical commotion so they can look more in the center as they move to the left. James Coonan from the Strawberry Statement, Notes of a College Revolutionary. The 10th of September, 2012. Secretary General, marking historic donation to League of Nations Library, hails Rockefeller Foundation's global philanthropy. Secretary General. Press release. Following Foreign Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's remarks on the 85th anniversary of the donation by John D. Rockefeller to endow the League of Nations Library in Geneva, the 10th of September. I am honored to be here on this 85th anniversary of the historic donation of John D. Rockefeller Jr. to the League of Nations Library. At the time, Mr. Rockefeller said he made the gift based on the conviction that peace must finally be built on the foundation of well-informed public opinion. This powerful statement rings true today. It is fitting that we are naming this room after him. I thank the family for donating the portrait of John D. Rockefeller that was displayed at the Rockefeller Foundation for 65 years. In offering this generous gift, David Rockefeller said he hoped it would serve as a reminder of his father's generosity, but more importantly his conviction that strong international organizations can help create a just, equitable and peaceful world. The Rockefeller family has lived up to this conviction, providing immense support for the League of Nations and the United Nations over the years. The original donation to this library was particularly significant. Even today, the interest provides approximately $150,000 every biennium to this wonderful library. That makes it possible to care for its many priceless historical treasures, including a signed copy of the Treaty of Versailles and the Covenant of the League of Nations. The Rockefeller Foundation at the century mark. Traying donor intent and harming America. By Kirk MacDonald. Headquartered in New York City, the Rockefeller Foundation was created in 1913. Its self-described mission is to promote the well-being of humanity by supporting work that expands opportunity and strengthens resilience to social, economic, health, and environmental challenges. But that's not what the Rockefeller Foundation does. The philanthropy promotes big government solutions at every turn, encourages more regulation of the economy and more dependency on the government, and backs corrupt social engineering schemes aimed at trying to force Americans to be better, i.e., more left-wing people. It promotes the coercive redistribution of wealth, but uses left-wing euphemisms to cover this up. For example, it aspires to make sure that globalization's benefits are more widely shared and its challenges are more easily weathered. Well, that should just about put the final nail into the coffin of the bullshit perception propagated by DZM, Benjamin Fulford and the White Dragon Society, and all others guilty of perpetuating the idea that the Rockefellers are the quintessential American capitalist family, shouldn't it? Does the revelation of their socialist inclinations give you some hint that perhaps I am not off the mark in thinking they deliberately portray themselves as bad guys in their role as the textbook example of what success means in the arena of American capitalist entrepreneurship?